Books employee and big Jennifer McMahon fan. There's a few housekeeping items before we start. Everyone should mute upon joining the Zoom. If you're not muted, please mute yourself. This will help keep down all the background noises as we will be recording tonight's reading. So also please turn your camera off. The video will be shared on social media, on the Kellogg Hubbard Library and Bear Pond websites and newsletters. So tonight, Jennifer McMahon will be speaking about her new book, The Drowning Kind. It's very exciting, which came out today. She'll be reading a very brief passage and is going to be discussing the book. After she reads, she'll be taking some questions, answering some of the questions that were emailed earlier today. And you can also put them in the chat as we go along, and I'll keep my eye on them. So a little personal anecdote about when I was living, I'm from Montpelier, but I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and I picked up a book at my local bookstore based solely on the cover and then the description. It was the middle of summer. It was called The Winter People. I was reading it in my pool. And as I was reading, I was thinking, this sounds like my hometown. I flipped to the back and lo and behold, Jennifer McMahon lives in Montpelier, Vermont. So that's when I first fell in love with her writing style. Obviously, all the Vermont bits, a little piece of home. So as for The Drowning Kind, I was very excited to get an advance copy. It's the imagery, the description, blending, the human and the supernatural. It's just the best. The way you describe the natural springs, you can just picture it. It's so creepy. I had to put it down in places. But this book, I loved the relationship between the two sisters that are so different in personality, but so deeply interconnected despite their differences. It was really fun to mesh the present day story with, the past 90 years prior, trying to dovetail the two and piece them together as you went along. And as always, the ending did not disappoint. So Sam's going to drop a link in the comments here of how to buy the book, which is available today at Bear Pond. And I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. And thank you for volunteering to do this and be here with me today. It's so exciting to be here with you. And thank you to everyone at Kellogg Hubbard and everyone at Bear Pond. And thank you to Sam for all your behind the scenes work on this. It's awesome. I'm so happy to be here. So every year when my book, not every year, but every time I have a book come out, I have a big party hosted by Bear Pond. And there's wine and cake and all my friends come and fans and we all celebrate. And sadly, we can't do that this year. But the really cool thing is people from far away can join me. And I'm so happy that you're all here and I'm seeing names I know and names I don't know. And I'm just so happy you're all here to join me to celebrate the book birthday of The Drowning Kind. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the book and a little bit about the inspiration and read a short bit. And then Emma and I are going to chat and we're going to answer some questions. So for me, every book begins with like an idea or a spark. And for me, The Drowning Kind began with a memory. When I was a little kid, my grandmother took me to visit a family friend down in Maryland. And this family friend lived in a big stone house. And behind the stone house, there was a stone-lined pool. And the water in the pool was black. And it was really creepy and you could just feel the cold coming off of it when you got close. And I kind of stepped up to it and I put my toe in the water and the owner said, "Oh, by the way, it's bottomless." And I took a step back and I was like, no way am I going in that water. That's creepy as hell. That's no way. And of course, there was a little boy who lived in the house and he saw me being a chicken and he teased me and called me a chicken. And I wasn't going to let a little boy call me a chicken. So I took a running start and jumped into the pool. And I got into the water and it was the coldest water I've ever been in. Couldn't see the bottom, couldn't see anything. And the entire time I was in that water, I was absolutely sure I could feel things touching my feet and my legs and kind of reaching for me and grabbing for me. And I was so scared. And I got out as quickly as I could while still saving face with this little kid. And I got out, and that pool has just stayed with me my whole life and my memory of that pool. And I've always wanted to write about it. And I've always wanted to write a story and kind of make the pool a character and ask the pool, have a chance to like explore the pool and ask the pool, what was up with you? What secrets were you keeping? So that's where The Drowning Kind began. The Drowning Kind began with that pool. I started it with that pool in mind. And slowly with that pool in mind, a story started to take shape. And it was the story of sisters and family and how far we'll go for the people we love most. The present day storyline begins with a woman named Jackie, who is a social worker. And she lives in Washington State, and she is there, and she gets a phone call saying that her sister has drowned in the old family swimming pool back in Vermont. And she's devastated, and she hasn't really spoken to her sister much in the past year. And she ends up returning home to her grandmother's old stone house and kind of trying to put the pieces together and trying to figure this out and trying to come to terms with her grief and make sense of it and try to figure out what happened and what was going on in her sister's last weeks of life. And she starts realizing that her sister was looking into the history of their family, but not just the history of their family, but the history of the land and the house and the old spring-fed swimming pool behind the house, long rumored to heal the sick and wishes. And then we have a second storyline kind of woven into the present day storyline that begins in 1929, where we meet Ethel. And Ethel is 37 and recently married, and she's happy. She's very happy with her life. She loves her husband very much. He's a town doctor. But the one thing that's missing, that's just like a hole in her heart, is she wants a child more than anything. And they've been trying, and she's been unable to conceive, and she's beginning to feel like something's wrong with her. And she's getting more and more stressed out, and she's trying more and more crazy things to try to get pregnant, and none of it's working. And her husband comes to her one day and says, you know what, let's have a romantic weekend away. There's a new inn that's just opened. There's a new beautiful resort and hotel that's just opened across, they live in New Hampshire, and it's just opened across the border in Vermont. And let's go and have a romantic weekend away at this hotel, at the Brandenburg Springs Hotel and Resort. And there are springs at this hotel, and they are supposed to be very restorative, and it's going to be good for us both to go. So they go. And Ethel just loves the hotel. There's rose gardens, there's peacocks roaming the ground, and there's this pool that people say will heal you and restore your vim and vigor and all that, but also perhaps it grants wishes. And she decides, let's do this. She thinks about it and she thinks, well, maybe I'm crazy, I don't know, but she ends up alone at the pool making a wish for the thing she wants most. And as she and also Jackie in the present day realize, you have to be careful what you wish for. So I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning. I'll read two short sections here from the very beginning. And the only thing I guess I should say, we're going to meet Jackie and Lexi when they are children. And they talk about Rita, and Rita is their aunt who drowned in the pool when she was a little girl. And they did not meet her because she drowned when she was a little girl. So this is July 18th, 2000. The dead have nothing to fear, Lexi said. The two of us treaded water, lips blue, teeth chattering. My sister wore her new light blue bikini, the color of the sky. And I had on one of her hand-me-downs, the fabric so worn that it was sheer in places. So when we play the dead game, we keep our eyes open no matter what. Her face was as serious got. Swear it? Swear you'll keep them open? I nodded. Even if you see Rita? She asked. Shut up, Lex. She's down there, you know. She's waiting for us. Shut up. I swam away from her, closer to the edge of the pool. She laughed, shook her head. Don't be such a chicken. Then she seemed to feel bad, to take pity on me maybe, to remember I was only 9. She put out her hand, pointer finger extended. Come on, she called. I swam back to her, reached out, crossed her finger with my own. The ex-girls, she said. Now and forever, I finished. Then we hooked our fingers together, squeezed, and let go. If she comes for one of us, she'll have to take us both, Lexi said. Lex! On 3, she said. 1, 2. Keep your eyes closed, Jax. I'll know if you cheat. I took the deepest breath I could. 3. We put our faces under and floated, suspended in the dark water, like twins in the womb. Gonna skip ahead a little bit. Face down, we floated. Lexi timed us with a fancy diving watch she'd gotten for her birthday. My record for staying under the water was 1 minute, 12 seconds. Lexi had gone up to 2 minutes. She was like a fish, my sister. Sometimes I was sure she had secret gills no one could see. But I was a creature of land, and my heart did funny things when I was in the water and not moving to stay warm. I lost all sense of time. I had no idea how long we'd been under now, and it took every ounce of willpower to not swim furiously to the edge and pull myself out of the pool. I kept my eyes open, scanning the darkness, searching for a glimpse of Rita, a flash of her white nightgown, a pale hand reaching up from the depths. I knew from old photos that Rita was tiny, a girl with dark hair, bright blue eyes, that she was never a camera hog like her 2 older sisters. And I knew she had loved to read. Lexi and I found books that she'd written her name in: Charlotte's Web, Little House on the Prairie, the Ramona books, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Our favorite board game in the house was Snakes and Ladders because it had Rita's name in big block letters on the inside of the box, along with a drawing of a snake and a little girl in a dress, Rita's imaginary friend, Martha. Whenever we found something with her name on it, we'd talk about why Rita had gone to the pool in the middle of the night. And whether it was Mom, Grandma, or Aunt Diane who found her floating the next morning. My sister loved to torment me with made-up stories about Rita. She's still here, you know. She lives in the pool. Haven't you seen her down there? When you open your eyes underwater, she lives in the pool, but she comes out sometimes. I pictured it. Pale little Rita with her dark hair dripping wet, pulling herself up out of the pool, eyes on the house where other children were playing with her toys, reading her books. Listen, Lexi would whisper late at night when she snuck into my room, crawled under the covers with me. Don't you hear that? That squish, squish, squish of footsteps? She's coming for you, coming for both of us. And I will leave off there. Thank you. And now I think we are going to chat.
Yes.
All right. Awesome.
I even know what happens, and I just got a little goosebumpy thing. Well, I have a lot of questions that people were sending in to Sam today, some on the side here and some of my own. And people are very curious about how, I mean, I've met you a number of times. Anyone can tell from talking to you that you're a lovely person. People are very curious as to how you first got interested in writing spooky, scary, creepy.
It's in my DNA. I think I wrote my very first story when I was in 3rd grade, and it was about a haunted meatball. And I did my best to make that meatball as terrifying as possible. You know, it was glowing green and it was tormenting the kid at the dinner table and then chased him through the woods at the climax of the story. And I was hooked from that point on. You know, I just felt like it was this magical thing that I could do where I could make anything happen, including make a meatball chase a little boy. And those first stories were really creepy. There was that story, there was a mud monster story. I mean, creepy in that 3rd grade way. There was that story, there was a mud monster story. There was a story about a girl who finds a body behind the wall in her house. So I've been doing creepy for a long time, and it's in my nature. It's when you go to school for writing, the thing that writing instructors say all the time over and over is write what you know. But my own personal motto is write what scares you. In fact, I had it tattooed on my wrist for my 50th birthday, write what scares you. So that I could just, so it could be a reminder to myself to stay true to myself and my vision. Because I found that for myself, that's when the writing is the most authentic, when I'm tapping into things that creep me out. And I have a lot of fears. I am a big scaredy cat. So I have no shortage of things that scare me to write about. And I'm also a terrible insomniac. So I tend to be up at 3 a.m, working myself into like full fret mode, worrying about things. And then I get to like wake up in the morning and write it all down and share it with you all.
Well, we're grateful. Is there any subject that you feel has spooked you out too much to breach yet? Like too spooky?
Someone asked me that recently, and I thought about it, and I know my answer, and I don't even want to talk about it because I get creeped out. Demons scare me. The whole idea of demons and demonic possession scares the Jesus out of me. I'm just like, oh, I don't know. And I've had this idea for a long time about a possession book, and I keep starting it and kind of writing my way around it and sort of writing other little bits of it, but not really getting to the heart of it because it scares me too much. But one day, perhaps I will get that book written. We'll see if I'm brave enough. I don't know.
I would love to read that. So you talked a little bit earlier about the drowning kind being inspired by the pool in Maryland. Do you incorporate true Vermont folklore, ghost lore, or is it mostly, things that you just come up with?
Yeah, it's all kind of made up. I mean, I'm definitely inspired by true stories, but I haven't incorporated any real true ghost stories or anything like that. It's all my imagination. But there's something, there's something about being here, like going for a walk in the woods in Vermont. And I'm me being a scared person, I go for a walk in the woods at night or in the evening, or, just as it's getting dark and the shadows are falling in that creepy way. And I get lots of ideas that way.
Yeah, inspiration. Well, I have a question from Kate Robinson, who wants to know do you have any methods that you use, such as writing by hand, that you could share about your writing process, or something that you do regularly, or does it vary by book? I know you've shared like your note cards or your mechanical pencils or traditions that you have.
Sure. I think the biggest thing is writing every day. I make myself write every day, even if it's, something small. I just get down and I write every day. I am a big believer in writing by hand and journaling. And here's my latest journal. I use old school composition books, and I always have one nearby. And I prefer to write with a pencil. So I've got my pencil and my composition book. So I try to journal every day. And when I'm stuck, I feel like it's a different process writing on the computer and writing by hand in a journal. So when I'm stuck working on a story on the computer, I'll just shut the darn thing down and pull out my notebook and do some free writing and write by hand. And that will get me unstuck a lot of the time, which is super great. So there's that, there's writing every day. And I think my biggest advice to aspiring writers is write the story you most want to read. My first published book, Promise Not to Tell, was the 4th one I wrote. The first 3 were me trying to write what I thought other people expected of me, and sort of more literary and more, they didn't have a lot of plot, which was a problem. And it was when I sat down, and so I wrote 3 books and nothing was really happening with them. And when I sat down and asked myself that most basic question, what's the story I most want to read? And the answer came back loud and clear, a ghost story, because I'm me and I've been always drawn to creepy stuff. And that's when I sat down and I started writing my ghost story. So that's my other advice for aspiring writers, is write the stories and books you most want to read, and write every day. And don't give up. Perseverance. It's all about perseverance, for sure.
Question from Lauren Tupin. She wants to know, if you could meet one of your characters, who would you want to meet and why?
Oh my gosh, that is a good question. One of my very favorite characters ever was the first character, the one that kind of started it all, Del Griswold, the potato girl from Promise Not to Tell. And I would like to meet her. And I would like to meet her as a girl before she became a ghost. And so I thought it would be okay.
Lights on.
I would like to meet her. Yeah, she's just been a personal, she feels like family to me. She's just a part of me, I think. And yeah.
Nice. Let's see. Melissa wants to know if you've ever considered writing a sequel to any of your books.
Oh, that's a hard question. I've thought about it briefly. I don't know that I have the attention span to write a sequel or a series. But there are characters, you know, like the characters in Promise Not to Tell, the Winter People. I wonder what I find myself thinking about them. Yeah, I find myself thinking about characters the way you think of like your old college roommates and people you like hung out with years and years ago. You're like, oh gosh, I love that person. I wonder how they're doing. We should touch base. I'll see if they're on Facebook, kind of thing. So I think about my characters like that, and I part of me would like to go back and revisit things and see how things might continue on. But part of me feels like I've put my characters through enough. Like in The Drowning Kind, I just put these guys through enough, and I need to just let them be.
That actually brings me to a question that I had for you. Did you find it difficult to develop a character that's deceased right from the beginning?
No. I had a lot of fun with that. Because in my mind, she was deceased, but she wasn't deceased. She was alive in people's minds and in the minds of the kids. And yeah, I think a ghost can be a character, and a dead person can absolutely be a character, especially like if you're in the house and surrounded by their stuff, and you know, like in the bit I read, the books with her name and the game with her name in it, and just surrounded by her. I feel like the places we live and the things we touch kind of are imprinted and hold echoes, and maybe that's its own form of haunting.
Yeah, and you mentioned using the pool as a character, which I think is something that you've done in past ones, like the cave and the Winter People, the motel and the Night Sister. Do those shape the story, or do they kind of evolve with the story?
Oh, I think they definitely shape the story. So settings are so important to me, and I see setting as like a character in and of itself. And so I do character studies when I'm working on a book, and I always do a character study for the setting. And like for the Drowning Kind, I did a character study for the pool. So I got out my notebook and I was like asking all the questions I ask my characters, like, what is it that you want most? What is it that you fear most? What's the thing you've never told anyone? And the pool was a little difficult. It didn't want to give up a lot of its secrets, but I kept at it, and I got some of them. But yeah, and I feel like the setting, the pool, the houses, I feel like setting is just like influencing characters in ways that they're not even understanding or aware of, kind of almost like another character. For sure. And settings are just really important in my stories. And setting, I mean, I can use it to create creepy atmosphere, hopefully a creepy atmosphere. Yeah.
Definitely. You had told me a story about naming a character, the ghost in The Invited, based on a little tombstone on your walk in a cemetery here in Montpelier. So I was curious about the character names in this book, how they came to you.
Oh, the character names in this book. I didn't get it. I may have gotten something from a cemetery. I do a lot of cemetery walking, and I never like take a full name from a cemetery, but I'll find like last names and first names, and I'll write them down or take a picture of them with my phone. I almost feel like I might have seen the name Ethel on a cemetery, and she might have come from the cemetery. Yeah. So cemeteries are a big one. I also have old phone books, and I'll sometimes flip through old phone books for character names, particularly last names, because I'm really boring when I'm writing. I'll be like Jones, Smith, and so then I need to do a little research and find a more compelling and more interesting name than that. Yeah, but Hattie, the name Hattie in The Invited totally came from a little stone in the back of the cemetery on Elm Street in Montpelier. And yeah, a stone I've always been fascinated with and wanted to know the story behind. And I was like, oh, I want to write about Hattie.
It's a good ghost name.
Yeah, it is a good ghost name.
There's a question sent in by Heather McMahon Miller. who says, people say never judge a book by its cover. I judged your book based on the fact that you and I have the same name. And I fell in love with your books. My question is, have you ever judged a book by its cover?
Ooh, I try not to. I try not to. I judge a book by its first page. I'm actually I almost hate to admit this, but I'm a really impatient reader. If a book doesn't grab me on the first page, I will more than likely put it away, unless it's something I have reason to continue with, like it's a friend's book, or it's a book that a lot of people have recommended and they're like, just stick with it, stick with it. But no, I will, I'll pick a book up because of its cover for sure. But no, I judge it by the writing. I judge it by the first page. But often it's that cover that grabs you, though, because you have to do something to grab you to pick it up to get to that first page. And for me, it's sometimes the cover, but it's often, listening to other people and hearing recommendations. I love all the book recommendations out there, being surrounded by readers and having people say, oh, you have to read this. It's awesome. Going into places like Bear Pond and someone saying, I thought of you, you should read this.
There was a comment just now based on covers. Karina Cruel, she said, Winter People and the Night Sister were my first two books. And when I bought the Night Sister, I actually thought it was the Winter People sequel based solely on the cover.
Oh my goodness.
Which now that I think back, I can kind of see, yeah.
And my earlier books with HarperCollins all had young girls' faces on the cover. Like, yeah. And a lot of people thought they were YA, which they were not, but yeah.
Claire wants to meet the Haunted Meatball.
I wish I still had my Haunted Meatball story, but sadly it does not exist anymore. I've tried to recreate it in my mind, and I remember only brief bits, and it wouldn't be the same if I tried to recreate it now. Yeah. Maybe the Haunted Meatball will come to you in your dream tonight, Claire. Woo! If it does, I want to know about it.
There was a question up here. I think it was Will Hallstrom. Have you ever considered reading any of your own audiobooks?
No, the people who read audiobooks are so good at it, and I don't have that talent. I love reading, but I'm not nearly as talented as the people who do it for a living. They do such a fantastic job.
Yeah. I'll have to listen to some on audio. Someone gave a suggestion for a place for you to check out. You should walk through Devil's Washbowl in Northfield to give you inspiration.
I have not been. I have heard about Devil's Washbowl. I was also reading about the Pigman legend in Northfield. There's reported sightings of a pigman, part pig, part man. I guess the face of a pig, I think. And it might be in that same area. I don't know. I clearly need to do more investigating.
Like there's no shortage of spooky towns and places to go to. I think
it was actually Will who was telling me, and I'm looking in the comments now. Yes. Yeah. People who was telling me about it, but yeah, we've got a lot of creepy stuff here in the Green Mountains if we're brave enough. Another place I really want to go in Vermont, but I've been too darn scared, is Glastonbury Mountain, the Bennington Triangle, where people disappear, mysterious disappearances.
I was just talking about that recently.
Yeah, and I really want to go, and I want to get some friends together and go for a hike, but I'm pretty scared. I don't know. I don't know if I'm brave enough. Maybe if there were enough of us. I don't know. We have GPS and lots of food and supplies.
Right, you won't get lost. Jamie Bilodeau from Ontario wants to know if you have any plans to publish any of your notebooks. You've shared a few on Facebook, including one of your grandfathers. They're dying to read them.
Wow. I don't know if you could read them. My writing is really terrible. So no plans to publish them because they're in Jennifer crazy writing. But I like that. I do like sharing, and I never know if people are going to be interested or not when I share pages from my notebooks of my kooky writing and drawings. And sometimes I get out watercolors and pen and inks, and I sketch out scenes from books. Or one thing that I do, and I shared this on Facebook, is in The Drowning Kind, one of the characters, Lexi, the sister who drowns, kept a journal on paper in a 3-ring binder and loose leaf paper. And so to get to know her, I did journaling from her point of view. So I did all these pages from Jackie's journal to kind of, from Lexi's journal, sorry, to try to get to know her. And so I put some of those up on Facebook, and that was fun. And it was a fun way to kind of get into the head of my character and do some fun art projects.
Yeah, add some dimension.
Yeah, some dimension. Yeah, I do a lot of journaling from my character's point of views.
Someone says that The Drowning Kind is amazing on audio. So
Yay.
note
Yeah.
to us that listen.
Awesome.
Julie Williams wants to know what your favorite season is in Vermont.
My favorite season, fall, definitely fall. Absolutely. The transition and the colors and knowing what's coming, but having it be far enough off that I'm not living in dread yet. And it's just so beautiful. And yeah, I love it. Halloween's my favorite holiday.
Oh, totally. There was a good question up here. Oh, a lot of people curious about your favorite authors. I would say both classic horror writers and like contemporary, like your peers.
Classic, I have to say Shirley Jackson. Anyone who hasn't read a lot of Shirley Jackson needs to get out there and read some Shirley Jackson. Yeah, she's someone I go back to again and again and reread and reread. And a lot of people know Haunting of Hill House, but We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Oh, read We Have Always Lived in the Castle. If you don't know that book, please, please, I beg of you, if there's one thing you take away from this tonight, go read We Have Always Lived in the Castle. It's wonderful. Contemporary authors. What am I reading now? I'm reading here. Look, oh, this book is blowing me away. Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones. Oh my gosh, werewolf book, scary.
That cover.
I know, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I read his most recent book, The Only Good Indians, and I loved that. So then I started reading this, and I'm loving that. Paul Tremblay, I love everything he writes. He's creepy and wonderful. And I started with Cabin at the End of the World, and I've read a couple of his other books and love him. Yeah.
Nice.
A few ideas.
Getting a lot of good.
I like creepy book suggestions too. So if anyone have any creepy suggestions, if the books I might not know about, tell me.
A lot of good feedback about the audiobooks. So apparently all your audiobooks are quite well received. Going down here. How do you know when you're finished?
Oh, how do you know when you're finished? Can anyone tell me? It's usually a deadline thing. I feel like I could tinker with a book forever, but I feel like I do get to a certain point where if I keep tinkering with it, I'm making it worse. And I can usually tell when that point is. And then I'm finished, for sure. But writing is a collaborative process for sure. So I'll write my process is I'll get this idea, like, oh, I'm going to write about that pool that I went to as a kid, and I'm going to incorporate this and that, and I'm going to make the pool a character, and there's going to be sisters, and there's going to be a backstory, and I'll sit down. I'm not a plotter or a planner. I never do an outline. I just dive in and start writing like crazy. And during the writing process, if anyone asks me, like, what are you writing about? I'll say, I have no idea, but it's really fun. There's a pool and there's creepy stuff going on, and I don't know, ask me in a few months. So I'll write my first draft, and then I print it out once I've got my first draft. And even then, I'm sometimes not entirely sure what it's about, but I think I have sort of maybe a beginning, a middle, and an ending. So I print it out, and then I lay it all over the floor of my house, chapter by chapter. And then once it's there, I start moving things around and kind of walking around it. And only then, when I'm sort of seeing it as this like collage, does it start to make sense to me. And I start to really understand the like bones of the story. And that's when I get all like crazy. And that's when the index cards come out big time. And that's when I start outlining and mapping, and I start pulling out sections and putting in placeholders where I know a new chapter needs to go. And then I'll do like an outline, and I'll get really organized. And then I'll do a rewrite based on that. And then it will go to my partner. She's always my first reader once I've done this second draft. And I think it makes enough sense to share with someone without them thinking I'm crazy. Then it goes to my partner. She's always my first reader. I listen to her feedback and thoughts. I revise again, then it goes to my agent. And I'm very lucky to have an amazing agent who is an incredible editor and super supportive and has great ideas. And he will kick me in the butt when he knows that I can do better. And when he knows I'm kind of slacking, and he's always pushing me to try new things and to go a little deeper with each book, I feel like. And I love that about him. So I'm lucky in that way. So then I'll do another revision and then it'll go to my editor. So I've got a lot of people helping me along the way. And when my editor, my agent, and myself and my partner, when we all say it's done, then it's done. It's not just me, thankfully.
Do you have a celebratory ritual when you're done?
Starting the next book.
Do it.
Yeah, I don't really have a ritual. Maybe I should come up with a ritual. No, I don't have a ritual. I'm one of those kooky people who has many things going at a time. Like I'll be working on one book and then I've got others going on that sort of back burner. I think of it like cooking, like there's the front burner book and there's the back burner books. So as soon as a book is done, then I just reach for one of the back burner ones that I'm most excited about. And also the really cool thing about doing it that way is when I get stuck on a book, I can kind of put it aside, like the book I'm supposed to be working on, the one that I have a deadline for. And I'm like, oh, here I am. And I'm working on this pool book. And she gets to this point and I don't know what happens. What's actually in the pool? What's going on? What does she see? What's going on? And I have no idea. So I'll put it away and I'll work on another book. And inevitably, once I start working on something else and taking my mind off the problem, a solution will come to me. And I'll figure out what's really in that pool. Maybe, or I'll think I know. I don't know.
There were a couple questions about your editor and your agent. How did you go about finding your agent? How long did it take?
My agent, I have been with my agent since the very beginning. Well, since my first published book. So yeah, I mentioned having the 3 books that nothing really happened with. And I was working with another agent then, and then I wrote this ghost story book that became Promise Not to Tell that I was super excited about. And this was back before like people could query online and send stuff online and look stuff up online. So I was like old school. I was buying the big thick books with Guide to Literary Agents and highlighting the ones and spending a lot of time in the library and in bookstores and looking through my favorite books, looking in the acknowledgements to see who my favorite authors were thanking as their editors and agents. So it was old school. So I made a list and I eventually lucked into finding an amazing agent who helped me shape that first book and turn it into the book that became Promise Not to Tell. And he's been my champion ever since. And I wouldn't be where I am today without Dan. He's wonderful.
And that Promise Not to Tell was published in
2007, I think. It was a while ago.
Yes. Very nice. Does your editor ever make you cut a lot of pages, or are you pretty good at not writing too much?
Usually because of the way I write, I have to write more than not writing too much, but there are things that I have to cut sometimes. And sometimes I am not happy about it at first. I'm thinking specifically, I just turned in a book and there was a part of it that I was very attached to because it had been how I started the book, but she pointed out that it took away from the overall story. And I was like, no, I didn't want to believe her because I was so attached to the writing in this part. But then I took a few days and I thought about it and I talked about it and I showed it to Drea and we talked about it and I thought about it and I let it sink in and I realized, she's right. I do have to cut it. So I cut it and it's okay. And maybe I'll use it for something else. That's the cool thing about cutting things and throwing things away, ideas, or sometimes whole characters or chapters, is that I might be able to use them again somewhere else someday, that I save it. I never throw anything away. You never know. You never know.
Right. All right. Let's see. People are dying to know what your next book will be about.
What my next book will be about.
Spoilers.
Yeah, I turned in the draft and close to finished draft, I think, of my next book. And I don't want to say too much, but it is a book kind of exploring the concept of monsters and monstrosity and what is a monster. And it is set in the present day, and it is set in 1978 on the grounds of a private psychiatric hospital. And it's those characters in the 1978 part are two kids growing up with their grandmother who runs the hospital, who is a psychiatrist. And yes,
Nice.
I relied on a little bit of my own experience. I grew up in the 70s, raised by a psychiatrist grandmother. And so I dug into my own past a little bit, not too much, because it's a lot creepier than my childhood, thankfully. My childhood was not that bad. It goes to dark places that thankfully my childhood did not, but.
Ah, well, everyone says it sounds so good already, so. Would you turn any of your books into movies? Morgan wants to know.
Oh, I would if I could. If I had the power to like stop reviews. Does Morgan know how to do that? Yeah, that would be really cool. And I've had some like nibbles and some interest over time with different books, and I felt like we got almost close a time or two, but it just it's a world that I don't understand. So much has to line up, and so many people have to agree. So even if someone, wants the rights to it, there's so much other stuff that has to go on. You have to get production people and a director, and you have to.
Which book do you think would make a good movie?
Oh gosh, I think all of them would be really fun to watch. I've always wanted to see The Winter People as a movie. I think one of the intimidating things about my books is that most of them have that present day and the past. And, so like shooting them and finding the characters, and yeah. And in some cases we've got, like kid versions of the adult characters. And yeah, I would love to see any of them. I think it's so fun. I did see someone actually went as far. Someone wrote a script once. We got as far as like a screenplay for Promise Not to Tell. And it was really sort of mind-blowingly interesting to read it, because it was my story, but it wasn't my story, because it was this condensed screenplay, and it was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a movie that never got made yet. We'll see.
Alicia just made a comment saying your novels would make an amazing mini anthology series like American Horror Story, which
that would be
I agree. Yeah.
That is a great idea. That'd be very fun. I love it.
Justin is wondering, with the book industry going in so many different directions, do you prefer having your books being released in hardcover or paperback? Does it matter to you?
So all of my early books when I was beginning my career came out as paperbacks, and I loved that. But I absolutely love having hardbacks, and then the paperback comes out a year or so later. I love that too. And there are people who prefer, there are people who will not buy a softcover or paperback, who will only they're like holding out for the hardcover. And then there are people who will only buy the paperback. So it makes everyone happy, I feel like. And now there's a whole audiobooks are like the rage. People are loving audiobooks, and people are reading digital books. I can't do that. I need to hold something in my hand. Although I have gotten, for some reason, during the pandemic and being at home, I've gotten into audiobooks. I've never was really into audiobooks before, but it's something to listen to other than the news, when I'm going for a walk. So I've been listening to audiobooks. And
someone said they like to go on walks with your books, which sounds scary to me.
just stay away from dark water.
Yeah, right. During the day, maybe. I don't know.
During the day, and yeah.
There was a question about the cover art. Speaking of judging of books by their covers, who comes up with these images? And
oh, the wonderful art department does it at the publisher. So what happens is I'll have a meeting with my editor and sometimes someone from the art team, and we'll sort of brainstorm and throw together some ideas about things that would be cool to incorporate. And we'll brainstorm, we'll get some ideas together, and then it goes to the people who know what they're doing. I mean, they come up with some great stuff. This cover, I just have to, it's beautiful. The John and Kind, they did an amazing job. And we just talked about like, we should get the pool in there, and maybe there's a woman, and wouldn't it be cool to get the roses in there too? And this is what they came up with, and it's spectacular.
mm-hmm.
So there are people who do that for a living, and that's so cool. And I admire them and trust them, and it's great. And sometimes, it takes a few rounds of ideas, they'll come back with something, and we're like, oh, that's not quite right. Or sometimes things need to be tinkered with a little, like the lettering doesn't feel right or whatever. And there's much discussion and rounding until we get something that everyone is happy with.
Yeah. I'm sure you saw when you were in the store today, our display in the window.
Yes, I loved it. Yes.
has the bouquet and
Yes.
the lace, so inspired by the cover, which was pretty
It's
cool
such a
for
nice
him.
display. I would love to take a picture of it, but the reflection of the window, you can't.
I know it's hard, but anyone that's local should give it a walk by because
It's
it's
a walk by. It's very cool.
Cora did a great job. Got a question from Becky who asks, does it ever make you sad to kill off a character?
Oh, yes. Yes. Sometimes, yeah, it does. Because I feel like I've lived with them for a long time and they feel like they're a part of me or a family member or, so yeah, I do. I get sad. And I get sad doing bad things to them too. And just, it's hard. It's hard to do bad things to characters, bad things to good people. It's hard, but that's what I do. Yeah.
All for the story.
But then I could always make them a ghost and they could come back again. So they're not really dead, right? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were scrolling up, we were talking about first lines, and someone had a great question about, you saying that it's really important that the first page pulls you in. I also always, the first sentence is really a telling thing for me. And someone asked about how you go about your first sentence and how you make sure it pulls people in.
Yeah. So one confession is that the first sentence in any of my published books are never the first sentence I write. When I sit down to work on the book, I think hard about how I want to, once I have my messy rough draft all over the floor, I think hard about how I want to open it. And I often end up either pulling something from some other part of the book or writing something completely new that I feel like will capture the theme and the general concept of the book and let readers know what they're in for and sort of hook them right away. And often it's something that happens a little bit later or something that I've just been like doodling with in my notebook and thinking about, and like this book begins with the two girls in the pool. And for a while, it just began with Jackie in the present day, and that just didn't feel right. I needed something else.
Yeah.
And I had a version where I had a very creepy version where I began with like the pool and the pool sort of speaking and thinking, but that was too much. That was too far over the edge. That was too far to the dark side. So that went away, and it just really worked because that way we get to meet Jackie and Lexi right away and see the pool, the character right away, and you feel the setting and you get the tone and you get what this book might be about, and you're drawn in, hopefully.
Yeah, it's a good hook, definitely. Morgan asks, do you ever plot everything out and then have to go in a totally different direction once you start writing?
So I, in general, am not a plotter or a planner. I just don't, my brain doesn't work like that. I did do one book entirely from an outline, and I worked really hard on this outline. It was like a 13-page outline. And I did it because my editor really asked for the outline. And I worked so hard. It probably took me longer to do this outline than it would have to write a rough draft of this book. And then finally I had an outline that we were all happy with. And they said, yes, yay, go ahead and write the book. And I sat down to write the book with this outline. And I was so bored and I felt so boxed in and constrained, and it took all the fun out of it. So I threw the outline on the floor and I just kind of went off and did my own thing. And I turned in the book, and my editor was like, well, that wasn't in the outline and this isn't in the outline. And I said, I know, but isn't it wonderful? And this is why I don't do outlines, because part of the, it's part of what keeps it exciting for me is not knowing what's going to happen next. I had no idea what was going on with this pool in The Drowning Kind. I had no idea what was going on with the sisters. And I was writing the story of Jackie and Lexi, and then I kind of decided, well, I need something showing the history of the place. And wouldn't it be cool if I had some scenes of it back in the past when there was the old hotel? So I decided to start writing from, I was like, oh, well, I'll show a couple going to the hotel. So I started writing Ethel's story. And I had no idea how the Ethel storyline was going to connect to the present day storyline. I just kind of started writing and believed that that a connection would appear, and I'd figure it out as I went along. And then once I realized what the connection was, it was like this aha moment, and the whole book kind of just came together magically. It's like, yes, okay, now I get it. And it was the pool holding everything together, but yeah, so I just have to go. And I never know what my endings are going to be. You know, I didn't know what was in the water. I had no idea what was in this pool. Was there really something down there? There's a character in the book who says the only thing that's in that water is what we bring with us. And I thought maybe she's right. Maybe that is all that's down there, is what everyone's bringing with them, their own imaginations and their own ghosts and their own hauntings and their own fears and insecurities. So was that it, or is there something else? I didn't know. I had to keep writing and get to the end to find out.
Do you ever write late into the night? Does that?
Sometimes I'm more of a morning person, but it is kind of fun for me because I'm brain dead at night. By the time I get to like 9 o'clock, I'm usually like I'm reading a book, and that's about all I'm good for, is reading a book. But it's really kind of almost fun when I try doing writing like 10 o'clock on at night, because in some ways, you know, I'll look at it the next morning and sometimes it makes no sense, but sometimes I have these big breakthroughs, I think, because my mind is sort of mushy and I'm like making these leaps and connections. And also it's easier to scare myself late at night. And, you know, my house is a little creepy. I live on like an old Victorian on the hill, and my daughter is absolutely convinced that it's haunted and is scared. Like she has a closet. She lives in like the converted attic of our house, and there's a storage space up there that I used to tease her when we first moved in. And I said it was the goblin closet, which probably wasn't the best thing. And she's like almost 17 and she's still a little bit afraid of that closet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I know. And she's like, I swear I just saw something in the mirror up there. And yeah, maybe you did.
Claire's wondering did you have a different career before you started publishing your books?
I did all kinds of things. So I started off life as a poet. I studied poetry as an undergrad and then for a year in grad school. And I envisioned this life for myself where I was going to write my poems and deliver pizza and paint houses and do whatever. I did a little bit of everything. I worked I worked with homeless people in Portland, Oregon. I did a lot of farm work. I worked for Washington County Mental Health, supporting folks who struggled with mental illness. I did a little bit of this and a little bit of that, whatever it took to pay the bills so that I could write my poems, and then whatever it took so I could write my fiction. And then I was fortunate enough to be able to devote myself to writing full time and have an amazing partner who was like, I'll support you. Everything's going to be okay. Just see where the writing takes you. Let's do this. Mm-hmm. It took 4 books and like 7 years and 2 agents and a lot of time and energy and blood, sweat, and tears, but eventually we got there.
Yeah. You said your partner is your first person to bounce your books off of. So Julie wants to know if your daughter has read your books.
No. My daughter is not a reader. She does not like to read. She's like started them and she's like, it's fine. And she's just, I know. And she's like, she grew up in a house full of books, and she'll read when she has to. She reads for school and does great. And she's like, she's doing fine, and she just does not like to read for pleasure. And everyone, you know, like booksellers and librarians and all my writing friends and everyone keeps saying, well, she'll just, the whole time she was growing up, everyone was like, she just hasn't found the right books. And one day she'll grow into herself and she'll find the reader inside her. And it just hasn't happened yet. I'm starting to believe that maybe it won't. I don't know. I started working on a brand new book, and I started reading that out loud to her just recently, and she was really into it. So maybe she needs to be read too, even though, you know.
That's good feedback.
And she likes audiobooks, and she'll do audiobooks, but not mine. She's really not interested in my books. I don't know. What that's about.
Got a big response from everyone listening. And there's another fellow writer, Kelly, says that her daughter is 14 and doesn't care to read anything she writes either.
That's funny.
There was a question up here from Will about, you said you lay out some stuff on your floor.
Oh, yeah.
In your office, and he's wondering if how your family deals with that. We just talked before everyone talked on about your new pandemic dog. So is there any worry that your floor...
Yeah, they don't like it. They're not thrilled when I cover the floor, because it's our living room and dining room, and you know, it's like, But at least now it's just them. Before it was like my daughter's friends, you know, she would have friends over and, oh, we can't go in this part of the house because my mom has her book out on the floor again. So yeah, and the fun part is we got a dog this past fall, but before that we had cats. And the best part is like the cats walking all over and kicking things everywhere. And yeah, and the dog was not allowed. The last time I did it, we did have the dog, and she was just not allowed in that part of the house for a little while. And usually I leave it on the floor for a couple days while I'm working on it. And now in the new dog life, it has to stay on the floor for a little while. Then I pick it all up at the end of the day and have to lay it back out again. Yeah.
Let's see.
And the cats, I consider the cats like serious editors. Like maybe they're trying to tell me something, they move something or kick something off. It's like, okay, well, Amelia just said that was bad, so that part's got to go. We got to start with something else.
Sam just asked if the floor arrangement helps with the structure of the book, or is that just more for your?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's only when it's on the floor that I start to really get the structure. Yeah, I always end up, once it's on the floor, I always end up doing like massive restructuring and like starting to see the actual, oh, well, this is the beginning and this is the middle and this is the end. And sometimes I'll like realize that something that I have going on 3/4 of the way through the book actually is it's the start of the book. So I have to rearrange everything. And I can only do that. I can't see that when it's in a Word document, or even, so I do all my rough drafts in a writing program called Scrivener, which is a lot more intuitive and works with my writing process better than Word, because it's got index cards and I can move scenes around and it's very cool. But even using that, it's not the same as laying everything out on the floor and getting like the bird's eye view and being able to pick things up and move it and do serious restructuring.
So you're a visual writer.
I am a visual writer, yeah, and all the colored Post-it notes and the colored notes, and you know, I'm big into color coding things. Once I have everything out on the floor, I'll get out my index cards and I'll make my outline, and I'll use different colors for each time period and each character and point of view and all that, and get organized that way. And it makes me feel organized after feeling so completely like chaotically disorganized while I'm writing my rough draft. So there's like the two sides of Jennifer.
A lot of commiserating about pandemic animals knocking books over, and
yeah, pandemic animals. Pandemic. I love our pandemic. Yeah. Our pandemic doggy we got. She's a sweetie, but yeah.
Do you handle your own Facebook posts, or does someone do that for you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do that, and that's why I don't post as often as I should, because it's me. No, and I know that there are people who have their social media handled by other people, and that just feels, I don't know, it feels inauthentic to me. I would rather just do it and do it badly and do it myself, and have people know that it's actually me than have someone else doing it. Although if someone else did it, then there would be a lot more going on Facebook, on my Facebook. And I don't do Twitter. I tried doing Twitter and I was a Twitter failure.
I don't even know how. Yeah.
I actually was sent to a Twitter class back when I was with another publisher to try to like learn the ways of Twitter, and I didn't do well in Twitter class. Yeah, and they kept saying it'll feel natural if you keep doing it, and it just never really came to feel natural. My favorite social media is Instagram. For some reason, it's easier for me to take a picture and put it up than words, which is weird because I'm a writer, right? So shouldn't Twitter be easier than taking a picture? But I don't know. For some reason, it's easier for me.
It goes to the visual, in you. It's yeah. Well, you're incredible when writing, so that's all we need. So,
yay, thank you, Will.
And yeah, people love your Facebook and your Instagram. All right. A lot of love for the social media there. I don't know if there's any more questions that people have. We're just about wrapping up here. Jen, do you have any more to say on what comes next?
Yeah, just the new book I just turned in, and it should be out in about a year if all goes well. And I'm not sure what's going to come after that, but hopefully I'm going to do my darndest to stay on the book a year schedule and try to have a book published about the same time every year. So the Monster 1978 book will be coming out next year, and I'm not sure what will come after that. I'm working on like 3 different things right now, and I'm not sure which one is going to get pulled to the front burner yet. So we shall see. I don't know. I've got a lot of good ideas, and I'm still tinkering with that demon book. I don't know. I don't know if I'll be brave enough to handle that or not.
I think you can do it. I know you can do it. Well, the book came out today. We have tons of copies at Bear Pond for all the local people. We ship them everywhere, and everyone should turn to their local bookshop if they're not local and pick up a copy.
Absolutely. And the local bookstores need us more now than ever. And we need them more now than ever. So I just have a quick little Bear Pond story. During the pandemic, during like lockdown mode, we weren't leaving the house or anything. And Bear Pond came and delivered books to our house. And it was just, I mean, it's so awesome. I love you guys. It's the best. You guys are the best.
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, lots of comments. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for sharing part of your evening. I know a lot of people are on like Zoom burnout after being on Zoom so much lately. So it means a lot that you guys all showed up here for this. And it was so great to see everyone's names and faces. And thank you. Next time we're going to have a party.
Yes, with cake.
A party with cake. I see Thomas the cat waving at me. Like, hi, Thomas. Oh,
Thank you for talking to us.
thank you so much. Thank you for doing this. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jennifer. This was really
Thanks,
great.
Jennifer.
Awesome. Thank
Nice
you.
to see you.
It was good to see you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.